to another episode of the Talking Horses podcast in association with Roudee Racing, by the people, for the people, the weekly podcast that looks behind the curtain of the sport with a view to increasing understanding, accessibility and enjoyment of racing for all. Ben and Bruno back with you again for episode 17, would you believe, Bruno? How are you doing, my friend?
I can't believe that. You? Does that mean we've been doing this for 17 weeks or maybe just a little bit longer?
I think we had 1 week off. So
yeah. Very good. It's impressive. I think we're established. That's what that means.
We've gone from the wind and the rain of late January to, I mean, it's not quite tropical weather out the window today, but it's definitely summery weather. So
for sure.
Yeah,
so
we made it through we're into our second, maybe third season. You want to view it from a seasonal perspective.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with that. But yeah, doing well overall and very much looking forward to what we've got in store in today's episode.
Absolutely, yeah. And that is an interview with Will Mort, bookmaker from Pat Whelan Racing, who, Bruno, you and I know from when we've been up at Chester. Pat Whelan has a pitch up there as well as a lot of other northern tracks. And so that this is a view behind the curtain of the sport from a bookmaker's perspective. And we talked to Will about all sorts of stuff, how he got into bookmaking, and then everything from pricing up a race and how they go about doing that to the future of the betting ring, and the sort of younger audience that are coming into racing and education around sort of horse racing, punting. So some fascinating stuff, and that is going to be the bulk of this week's episode, an extended deep ground with Will. And then Bruno and I will be back to have a look ahead to Roudee Racing's runners in the coming days before finishing with our weekend selections. And we also had a successful guest tip last week, which I've been accused of copying. But it won. So it doesn't matter what happened there. Our listeners got a winner. So we'll just focus on that, won't we?
Yeah, I think we will. Yeah, totally fair.
So good stuff. So Bruno and I will be back with you after a conversation with Will Mort from Pat Whelan Racing. So we're fortunate enough to be joined on the Talking Horses podcast this week by Will Morty from Pat Whelan Racing. Morty, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, boys. Ready for great action racing this weekend. So we're at Chester, Cartmel and Haydock. So we've got 3 teams out. So hopefully some good results.
Fantastic. I guess you're not going to all 3 of those. Which one will you be at?
I'll be at Chester. So the local track. Yeah, back.
Fantastic. Have you ever been to Cartmel, by the way?
Yeah, it's really good. Really
beautiful, isn't it?
It's we've got number 1 pitch at Cartmel. So we're literally near the parade ring where the stream is, and it's not work when you work there, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it is brilliant. It's a great day out. Definitely recommend it.
It definitely seems it. Yeah, and you've got all this sort of beautiful town, and then you've got kind of Simon Rogan's restaurants as well, and you can do it in style if you really want to. So yeah, that's definitely on the short list. So listen, today we're going to talk about the Talking Horses podcast, as Bruno and I say each week, is all about trying to pull back the curtain of racing and kind of helping sort of people get better accessibility to the sport, better understanding, and ultimately better enjoyment. And I think one of the things that is always really interesting from Bruno and I's perspective is the punting angle. That's something that everybody that we've spoken to on the podcast in the first 15 episodes, people have said they sort of got into racing because they enjoy a day at the races and everything that entails. And obviously a big part of what it entails is having a bet. So we want to sort of get your view on the bookmaker's perspective of a day at the races and kind of everything that goes into that. But maybe if we can start, Morty, just to kind of go right back to the beginning for you, as we always do with our guests, and just kind of get an understanding of kind of how you got into racing and ultimately how you got into the profession of bookmaking.
Yeah, so my granddad was a jockey in the late 40s, early 50s for Henry Beebe. So the Beebes who now own Goff's Sales Ring. Right. So he was an amateur there over jumps.
Proper racing.
But yeah, proper.
Ooh.
it was tough, collar and tie when you worked out, he said, and it was just a different world back then. So I remember, again, like many of the people you've had on, watching racing with my granddad, and then he trained a few pointers for a woman called Mrs. Glassford, the Cheshire Forest. So I was usually at the yard all the time, and that, getting to know, the ins and outs of racing. And I've actually got my first ever race meeting was 2004 at Bangor, and I've actually got the card.
Oh, amazing.
A.P. McCoy's autograph on it.
Oh, wow. I love it when people bring props onto the podcast. So if anybody's listening to this through one of the podcast apps, go on YouTube and watch it, because Morty's just pulled out a piece of something that might find itself into a charity auction at some point, or maybe never.
And I was 5, so I used to go racing with Grandad, and then my dad also loved his racing. So we used to go all the time, Bangor, Chester. And literally I was hooked. I loved the horses, and a day out of the races, so it was really, I was mostly at race courses when I was about 5, 6 with Grandad and Dad. So that's how I got into horse racing, and through the bookmaking really was by chance. My dad always used to say, we always used to go to Pat Whelan or Manny Cook. He said, don't go anywhere else, only those two. And, we always did. And that's how I knew Patrick, really. And Patrick's dad was a very, very big bookmaker, a fearless layer, in the 80s and 90s, very well respected, and still is, And then he said, do you want to work for a day at Chester and learn how to do the book? And that was, 4 years ago. So, and I love it. It's not like work, really.
When we were at Chester for the May Festival, you're buzzing around the place, clearly having the time of your life, whilst doing your job. And I think that's something that Bruno and I are probably pretty envious of, to be honest.
yeah. So afterwards, we're on, we're on the roof afterwards, or we're going to town or whatever. But it is very serious though when you're working. I usually sometimes I'm on the book or I'm on the front taking bets. And like when you lads came up, we laid a very hefty bet on an 21 outsider, and you've got to go, God, we've got to get this back or whatever, So
go on. Let's just, seeing as you mentioned that, let's just get into that quickly. So what do you do when somebody comes in and puts a particularly big bet on a horse, and obviously your liability changes? What do you need to do as a bookmaker to kind of hedge yourself there?
So say, like, for instance, that horse which was running on Saturday, by the way, Restorer, was 22-1, and this fella had a monkey 500 each way on it. So then we're like, oh God. So what we would do is we would back it back on the machine. So say if it was 22 on our board, it would probably be 33-1 on the machine. So we could hedge it back. Or like years ago, you'd go, I'd say to someone on the front, go and have 500 or 100 each way with another bookmaker next door or around the ring. So that's how it really works. We back a lot. We back everything back to balance the book. Like when you came over to us, it was usually like in red, and then once you back everything, it goes like to green. But like that 22-1, we then crashed it down to like 16s. So yeah, that's what happens really. Or you could be brave and just stand it.
Yeah. So that the phrase, I like the phrase you just used about Pat, that a fearless layer, or was it Pat's father? But so that that I guess that's what you're describing there. Then is it just being brave and saying, okay, well, let's we don't think this will win, so we're just going to stick it out.
Yeah. Basically, some bookmakers and especially on favourites, some bookmakers are, about 3,000 liability, and they'll just say, we'll just stand it. But, like our firm, we're more of a figures and turnover.
Right.
So, we bet to good figures. And I think I'm Patrick's more figures and turnover, but I'm more like an opinion, when I'm on the book, where, for me, I study the races. I do my own tissue, which is my own prices, and then on the machine, I know which one to lay or which one to back. But sometimes that opinion doesn't always work out, and you go, "Oh God." But it's like going to school without your homework.
Yeah.
If you don't know what, say, the favourite Chester's drawn 10 and doesn't like soft ground, well, for me, that's a definite lay. If it's 7 or 4, well, they could have 2 to 1 with us and lay it all the way home.
Yeah.
But it is like a set of scales. It definitely is. And it's great when you're taking on the punter and they're taking on you. So that's
I think that's the fascinating piece for me that I've always enjoyed more and more as I've got to grips with the sport. Because different from your upbringing, Morty, or your introduction to the sport, mine was definitely the gambling element first and the racing second in a way, or the horses second, which I guess probably for a lot of people listening to this, it might be more the more well-trodden route versus your angle. But there's a journey to get to that point where you're really taking on the bookmaker and feeling like you're on a level playing field. Do you feel that's right? And is there a bit of a split between audiences or different types of customers that you're seeing, either rolling up at the betting ring or wherever, that impact that gives you a different view when you see somebody rolling up to the betting ring that you think, oh, this guy's informed. Does that make you think twice about certain things? Is there a reading that you need to do with the punter?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think now, years ago, say, God, well, before exchanges, the biggest bet, you would take thousands, on a race.
Yeah.
Well, now you go, I remember even at Bangor on Tuesday, a fellow wanted a big bet, and you go, ooh, you either think, is he well informed, or you think, why can't he get it online? The exchanges,
right.
So that's the new era now, where you think, oh, there's a $5 bet coming here. What does he know? So you know what I mean. So you have to be shrewd. You know who the punters are.
Yeah,
definitely.
Do you see familiar faces? Do you the same people coming back?
Yeah.
Okay.
All the time, and you know the shrewd ones, and you don't know the shrewd ones, if you know what I mean. And when the shrewd ones have a good bet, and you think, and it's neck and neck, and they're jumping over the last at Bangor or coming round 2 furlongs and they're in front, you go, oh God, But yeah, it has changed definitely. In that, and you've got to look after your punters as well. We've got some great fellas who come up and bet with us, and it's you take the bet with a smile, and if you win or you lose, you pay out with a smile. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's the way it goes.
I think that's the lovely thing about. Sorry to interrupt. I think that's the lovely thing about the betting ring, which should never be lost. But I guess there's a bigger picture where you've got, the machine, as you call it, Betfair, the Betfair Exchange, and that kind of model building up. How do you react to that in your position? Working for Pat Whelan, what's the sort of concerns or the opportunities, even sort of looking ahead for the betting ring as a whole?
It's a tough one, for me, a few of the lads say, Morty, you're 20 years too late. You got in the game 20 years too late, mate. It's the way that this is the way it is, and I say things have changed. God, look, technology and everything, but those old timers wish that they still had the chalk and pricing up, but everything has to evolve, and that's what hope. The betting ring has to evolve. And now we shout out cash or card, like that. Like we've got a card machine now because we have to.
So you still take cash as well, though?
Oh yeah, still take cash, but but as times since COVID, we've got a card machine, because there's been a few times where I remember I was at Uttoxeter on a student day, and Uttoxeter is card only all around the course.
Right.
And I felt like I should have been a bank. Do you take card? Take card. And we didn't have a card machine. So that's the way it's going. And we've got to adapt, and I've got to go forward with it.
Does that make any difference to you? And indeed, do you think it makes any difference to the punter on a broad scale, moving away from cash and moving to contactless payments, whether it be buying food and drink or whether it be having a bet?
Definitely. There's no better feeling than taking on the bookie. You've got cash. But again, another another negative of card is that it's slower.
Right.
Someone wants £10 or £20 on card, while someone behind might have £500 in the hand, and then they might go next door. You don't have a card machine, so it does slow it up. Race courses.
Interesting.
Oz went down at Chester a few times. It has its positives and its negatives. It's just the sick, like at Aintree we used it, and a few times it went down.
Right.
So swings and roundabouts, but we've got to move. We've got to go with the times, and that's the way it is, sadly. But we've got to keep going.
That's an angle I hadn't considered. I don't know about you, Bruno, but that's fascinating because as you say, Morty, because you've got a short window of time where you've got the punter's attention and they're in your queue and they're one or two people back and they're looking at the prices. But in the betting ring, all the boards are very close together, and if they see the price move, they might just switch out of one queue and into the next. So technological meltdowns are pretty expensive for someone in the betting ring, for a bookmaker in the betting ring.
Yeah, no, definitely. But we again, with the computers, a few times Betfair's gone down. So you're kind of working like old school with no exchanges. So then a bit of tic-tac comes in with different bookmakers. But we have RDT, which are racecourse technologies, and they're usually all around the course. So if anything does happen, they would sort it out, or and like you said, a lot of people don't really know that if, say, the computer goes down, there's always a backup or RDT come over and help us. But they charge £25 meeting.
Right.
Used to be 20, but in the last 3 weeks it's gone up, and there's been a lot of kick off about that. But they're good lads, and I think that they help us. So that's what it should be.
I wanted to go back to just a question I was going to move on to, but just you mentioned there's a lot of talk about kind of guys coming up to to have a bet. Is it really? I mean, I'm assuming it is, but do you still see that it's quite a male-dominated thing, that punting in the betting ring?
Yeah, definitely. Especially at Cheltenham and the big festivals. Yeah, definitely. Some bookmakers, women come up and have £1 each way with a £20 note. Well, you know what I mean. You think, sorry, madam, but it's £5 minimum, or £2.50 each way, and they go, okay. But with one woman, I remember, God, it was at Chester, and she was having £200 on. I don't know if it was for her husband or not, but I did say to her, and she won. And I did say to her, "Oh, is that for your husband?" She went, "Oh, no, for me." And I thought, "Oh, okay." So, but no, it is very male dominated still.
Yeah, because I wonder whether there's something there about, we talk about the future of racing, and Bruno and I talk about it every week, and we're talking about it today from a betting perspective. I wonder whether there's something there. Racing needs to do more to try and attract not necessarily a new audience, but to make certain elements of the sport more accessible to, whether it's gender, whether it's age, whatever. So, I wonder whether there's something there. I have no idea what the solution would be. I'm not about to give, something off the top of my head, but it just, it feels like something where, when you go into the betting ring, it always feels like it's very male dominated. So, I wanted to ask you about, so you mentioned the tissue. So could you just, for the absolute layperson, explain what you mean when you say a tissue, and then also how do you go about pricing up a race when you're kind of looking at the race day? How far in advance, and what factors do you take into account?
Yeah, no, of course. So I do my own tissue. So a tissue is pricing up a race, which you personally. So that's without looking any exchanges or anything. So, so say, for instance, like at Chester, where Roudemental's running on Saturday, I'd look at the draws first, Chester 1 to 4. I would look at the markets on, I'd look at its previous run, and I would then go, say, Roudemental would be, say, 5 to 2. The second horse on my book would probably be 4 to 1, 5 to 1, and then work it like that. I then write all that down. And then on tomorrow, I would go to the races, and Patrick will then go, "What do you think?" We'd look at the exchanges and see if I was right or wrong. So you could either go with a favourite, or not, or lay the favourite, sorry, or say something that I think is 9-2, and it should be 3-1. You've got your margin there. Like I said again, but other bookmakers just go basically on the exchanges. Wouldn't know what's running, wouldn't know what jockey's on. But for me, I like to do that because I kind of, it's like I said again, it's like going to school without your homework. You know what I mean? I've got to know that before, looking at the exchanges. But for instances, like you said about horses that are getting backed in, sometimes in your book, it's like a set of scales. So once something's getting backed in, something's got to drift. You know what I mean? So, for instance, the favourite, we open up at 6-4, and the second favourite's 2-1. All the money is for the second favourite, not the favourite. We've taken a bit on the favourite. Say the 2-1 favourite then goes to 6-4, and the 6-4 favourite goes out to 7-2. Then the second favourite is the loser in the book, and the original favourite is the winner.
Right.
So that does happen. And you might say, well, I don't fancy both of them, or the exchanges are not really. We'll lay them both in the book, and let's hope the third in wins. So that's how it kind of works. But it is mostly dominated by the exchanges now.
And do you feel as though doing your homework? Sorry, Bruno. Do you feel as though doing your homework can give you an advantage versus a bookmaker that's just following the exchanges?
I would say, personally, it's a positive and a negative. If you bet to good figures on the machine mainly, but I like to have an opinion. Different people bet differently. Different makers. We're mostly figures and turnover, which we are, on the machine. But I'm kind of someone who has an opinion as well, and I would say, lay this, Patrick, or don't. You'll go, let's just see what it's like on the machine, or but that's how it works. But sometimes it can be a negative, sometimes it can be a positive.
To me, that feels like an advantage to have somebody like that in your your bookmaking business. Totally. And it's just more involved, and you can be more reactive, Morty, as well, can't you? When that big punt comes in, you can instantly get a feel for whether you're going to let it stand or hedge it somewhere else. That's the benefit, surely, is that you can be quick on your kind of agile in that moment. We should do a tissue. Let's do a tissue, Ben. Let's do our own for whatever meeting is happening next weekend.
We'll take time. Expose us horribly, but
I'm sure it will.
For giving it a go.
Send
it to Morty for appraisal. Must do better.
Yeah. We will. We'll send it to the teacher. Yeah.
But no, and it's like, for instance, an owner. I write all the owners down, and because I watch racing and I know a few people in racing, I know that sometimes owners come up to us, and some bookmakers wouldn't even know, and they have a big bet, and you think, oh, this must be pretty warm. So it is good to have a look at the cards. You've got to, like Marwan Kukash, he comes up sometimes and has a bet. And
those are the famous grey silks with the star that are so synonymous with Chester, right?
With Chester, but it's not him who comes up; it's his friend. So what happens is I've seen him, on the roof or with photos, when the horses won, and I say to Patrick, that's Marwan Kukash's representative, and he has a good, but Patrick wouldn't know, or other bookmakers wouldn't have a clue who he is, So it does work. You've got to do your homework,
So that's fascinating because, this is, like I mentioned earlier, like when we were up at Chester, and the few times I've been up and we've met, you're buzzing around, you're chatting to people. On one hand, you're thinking it's just because you love it and you know lots of people there, but actually, one of the advantages of that is you know people at the racecourse, and so maybe that obviously is advantageous when you know who's having a bet versus it being a complete stranger. So that's really interesting. So let's move on to something that you and I talked about a couple of days ago when we were prepping for this, and we were, again, Bruno and I talk about the future of racing, existential things, and there's all the talk at the moment about the gambling review, and you made a really interesting point about sort of the betting that happens these days, particularly among the younger audience, which is obviously such an important audience for the future of racing. So rather than my ask you detail about it, just maybe perhaps you could sort of share with us the viewpoint that you were sharing with me.
Yeah, no, of course, it's well documented that, there's a lot of problem gamblers, who are betting and losing, their life savings, and people are, and it is a big worry, and like youngsters, like you said. But for me, it's more, like you see on the betting firms, the fixed odds terminals, the slot machines.
Mm-hmm.
Youngsters are all, 20p on this, a slot, and also, betting on the football, how many yellow cards, how many, fouls is Man United are going to, red cards. And you might as well put £20 down the drain. And for me, it's for the youngsters, it's worrying because they're not educated on how to gamble. For me, yes, it is an addiction, and people, have terrible stories. But these youngsters, need to be educated. What a place pot is at the race course. What a lucky 15 is. 4 singles, 6 doubles, 4 trebles, and an accumulator, or painting 7 bets. Youngsters don't know this. Don't know what each way is. £5 each way. They wouldn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
And it is worrying for the gambling commission and for bookmakers, because we sometimes we're always like the bad people. We take the money off everyone, and whilst for me it I agree with online stuff. It is terrible with the betting, the slot machines and that. But I think youngsters should be educated on how to gamble. It's got to be safe. Bet to your pocket. Because I've seen some youngsters come up and God, it must have been before COVID, and there's a group of them, and this fella pulls out £200, and he goes. He says to his mate, "What will Will out? Well, I don't know." And he had £200 on the outsider, and I said, "Outsider, sir." No. I'm just putting it on for a laugh. And I just thought,
I
gave him the money back, to be honest, because I didn't want to. He was drunk, and he was only about my age. It's sad, But
was he grateful to you for doing that, for sort of not taking his bet and kind of advising him against it?
Yeah, his mate was, but they were both drunk, and again, like you said, it's becoming a culture now at race courses where there's no real racing enthusiasts like ourselves, like youngsters coming through, and it's just a day out, get drunk, have a few bets, either we've won online, and then I go on the slot machine when everyone, when I'm, what I mean. That's the kind of culture we're creating, and I think it's very telling that you look at round race courses now, and the amount of people, youngsters, not watching the horses go around the parade ring.
Yeah, sure.
They're in the bars, or and you think that is so worrying for racing. People are trying to get youngsters involved. And again, it's like when I'm not racing, I watch racing all the time on ITV, and the amount of gambling ads on ITV when the break's on is quite frightening.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, Bruno, you and I talk about, and we did this last week in episode 14, we talked about, the value of for the race goer. And we talk a lot about, my one thing to change was it should be easier to get a pint at Cheltenham. But this is a really interesting alternative perspective, isn't it? That actually we talk about the value to the race goer. We haven't considered, or certainly we haven't discussed it on the pod anyway, the education of the younger audience about how to bet responsibly.
Yeah, totally.
That could be interesting, couldn't it?
Could totally agree. I've never even thought that. It's the same with a lot of racing, in that you need to sort of do your own homework to get clued up on how the sport works. But it gets more dangerous when you talk about the gambling side. And there's just so much choice out there now, isn't there, from an online perspective in terms of the markets you can get involved in. But racing, given its kind of inseparable link to gambling, needs to take control of that, doesn't it? And it's racing's responsibility to educate. So how that's done, I don't know, but I think that's just such a good point. Yeah. And I think there is a sweet spot where racing and gambling, and you touched on it earlier, becomes really, really enjoyable because you're taking on the bookie and you're informed and you love the sport anyway. So even if it doesn't go the way you want it to, it doesn't matter as much. You're being smart with your money. That's kind of where we've got to, myself and Ben probably, but only after years and years of, landing in that spot where we know enough about the sport. So I just think that's such a valid point. And I guess that's what the Gambling Commission are trying to maybe help get on top of. But the way that's obviously been played out is perhaps missing the point slightly.
Feels like affordability checks get discussed a lot, but actually there's so much more to it than just knowing how to, to sort of stopping people betting more than they can afford. It's not just about, for me anyway, people getting into problem gambling. It's just people actually being able to really get the most out of it, and kind of to give the gambling on horses in particular a better reputation than I think it has.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with both of you lads. And like, if you asked 50 youngsters tomorrow at Chester what a place pot is, they'd just look at you if you got two heads. Where, or what a lucky 15 is. Say if someone fancied 4 horses, you put it in a lucky 15, pound each way, 30 quid, or 50p, £15. And this is the thing, they're not people. I don't know, maybe ITV could help people more, and they want a younger audience. It is a worry. It's a big worry for me, but hopefully something can be done about it.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're trying to do. And look, send people our way, Morty. If they come up to you and they don't know what a play spot is, then say, listen to this podcast, guys, because they will sort you right out. Because we don't really know much more ourselves. We're learning as we go as well, which is part of the fun of it. Right. Well, on that note, why don't we, given you're the expert, it'd be remiss of us not to ask you about what's happening this weekend, what you're fancying and what you're not fancying. So a tip and a lay. A bonus lay, which we wouldn't normally ask our guests of, but given your position, it would be a miss not to. So take it away.
I've had a good study, so I'll go for the lay first, and that is Dragon Symbol at Haydock in the 145.
Okay. We're both writing this down keenly.
Yeah. So that's my lay. So I'll be telling Roxy, who's at Haydock with Louise, or Stephen, to get that in the book straight away.
Okay.
My nap is at Chester, and that is in the last race at 5:30 called Lunar Jet for Mick Mullineaux and Robert Havlin. This horse was with John Mackey 2 years ago. Used to be rated at 93. Now with Mick Mullineaux, came 5th in the November handicap at Doncaster with Kieran Fallon Jr. at 150 to 1 over the distance. And he ran in the May Festival, and me and Michael, the clerk, really fancied this horse. It was 66 to 1, but it was drawn 13 to 13.
Right.
So we thought, oh God, that's a bit of a price. And it didn't run to anything. He was just completely at the back. But tomorrow, I think this horse, it's now on its career low mark. It's got good form at Chester. It's been placed twice. So that's the nap, and I think it's about 11 to 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the draw, Morty?
6 out of 8. But again, it's not a big field. There's only 8. But the jockey booking Rob Havlin, that's also that was one of the reasons as well. I think he's got 2 rides or something. So Lunar Jet each way in the last.
What do we know about Michael Mullineaux? That's a new name to me.
Mick, funny enough, my granddad used to do a bit of work riding for Mick actually years ago. Well, my granddad stopped riding when he was 75. So he would break horses. So Mick trains near Nantwich, very local, a very shrewd trainer. I mean, if he gets a good jockey on board, like I remember Kieran Fallon, senior, he would be, if he was on one of Mick's, the money was down, So, so that, again, that's the horse tomorrow, hopefully each way, and 3 places as well with Betfred. So always look for your value as well. Place terms.
Fantastic. Good man. So Lunar Jet 5:30 at Chester tomorrow is the nap. Fab. Morty, I think this is by some stretch the longest conversation we've had with a guest on the pod so far, but I hope that our listeners would agree that it's been time well spent. Absolutely fascinating, and I think we could talk to you for another 45 minutes and still not get to the bottom of everything. But mate, thank you so much for joining us. You're absolute legend, and we'll definitely have you back on, and good luck this weekend, and good luck getting Dragon Symbol in the book at Haydock.
Thanks so much, guys. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
So Bruno, fantastic insight from Morty there. I think you and I can safely say we've probably learned quite a lot about the bookmaker side of things from chatting with him. Fascinating stuff.
A huge amount that I've just learnt there. What a stressful job that is, first and foremost. But I just love his passion for it, for the actual sport as well. And it's that obviously his upbringing has grounded him in viewing betting through a sporting lens rather than just as a gambling exercise. And I think that is the place that we like the sport to be in terms of its relationship with that side of things. So yeah, really good.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So we're going to have a little look ahead to upcoming racing, both from a Roudee Racing perspective and then from a weekend selection perspective. But before we do so, we're going to have a very quick look back at Glorious Angel's run from when did she run? Last Friday, wasn't it? Up at Haydock. What were your impressions, very briefly, on Glorious's latest race course effort?
Well, we were watching on the iPad, weren't we, together, and you saw something different in Glorious in that run, which we hadn't seen from her before, which was a little bit of anxiety, I suppose, in the run to post, which we hadn't seen. The vision we'd seen of her was one that was very cool, calm, and collected. So it's just interesting as Glorious develops, as an animal as well as a racehorse, that there's lots of changes still to come. She's 2. This is her 3rd experience of a race course.
Yeah.
First time at Haydock. The factors are infinite in terms of what can affect your mentality. And obviously that had a little bit of an impact in the run itself, in that she was running pretty free early on. She made the running, but you could tell the jockey was hanging on to her quite a bit. So, and that probably, in the chats that we've had with the other owners, probably was part of the reason why she wasn't able to win the race, which we all felt pretty good about beforehand. So yeah, it's just interesting, is it, that it's all part of the ups and downs of ownership and following horse racing, is that these are not robots. They are sentient beings like you and I, and they go through the ups and downs just like the rest of us. So yeah.
Probably got a bit more depth than you and I, but there you go.
Yeah, easily.
The run at Haydock was they sort of split into two groups, and Glorious was making the running down the right hand side, down the stand side, and I forget the prices of the winner and the second, 50 to 1, 25 to 1, or something prices. Like that.
Yeah.
But the pace that they were up with the pace on the other side of the track, and I think what was interesting to me is that Glorious sort of 2 furlongs out seemed to sort of start to struggle a little bit, but then once the Richard Hannon horse came up alongside her, she sort of picked up again to the finish. So I just, for me, I just wondered whether maybe if she'd been drawn differently, if she'd been on the side with that pace, then maybe she'd have had something to aim at. We might have seen something different, because as you say, they're all learning, and so if they're out there having to sort of do the work on their own, that as opposed to having something to shoot for, maybe that makes a difference. So anyway, a theory that I had, and we will see on Monday whether that theory is a load of bollocks or whether there's something to it. She runs again, or she's entered anyway, to run again up at Redcar on Monday afternoon. Yes. we are 24 hours away from declarations for that, but that's the 125 restricted maiden filly stakes bands C and D. So we'll be hopeful that she can be seen to better effect on Monday, and then it'll be a good day Monday because we've also got Lordman running for Roudee Racing, and that is up at Ayr, which is a beautiful racecourse, I think. I mean, it's a hell of a long way from us down in southwest London, but maybe one we can get to at some point.
I'd love to get there. I'd love to go racing there. And Perth as well is supposed to be magnificent for racing as well. But in terms of Lordman, we're fact finding, I guess, still with Lordman. He's been stepped up for this as a need to 10 furlongs. More usually on his previous runs, he's been running over 7 or 8. So that will be really interesting to see how he copes with that, how he settles. He's obviously got a character about him, which Hugo and Ross mentioned on episode whatever it was. So yeah, let's see how he does over that new trip.
Come on, the Lord, get yourself together. Let's see some of that untapped potential finally be tapped. So that is we're 24 hours away from declarations, but that's 6:30, so Monday evening up at Ayr. It's the Royal Mile handicap, as you say, over 10 furlongs. And then, very excitingly, for the majority of the owners who are based up that way, unfortunately you and I can't make it up, we have Roudemental running at Chester. A home match. That's 4:55, the penultimate race of the day. Tomorrow.
I like the name of the race.
Go on.
The Tomahawk Steakhouse Handicap.
Oh yes, I saw that. Yeah,
delicious.
Well, we'd all be going out for one of those if Roudemental can put his best foot forward. So he is also stepping up to 10 furlongs, 10 and a half furlongs actually, for the first time. I think what we've found out subsequently. We were talking to Mike about this the other day. Is that Charlie Fellows horse that won Fresh Hope in Roudemental's last race at Doncaster is actually one that Charlie had said is black type filly in waiting and one that was a perfect type for I forget the appropriate fillies race at Royal Ascot, but one that he had that in mind for. So it's quite obviously coupled with the great Jamie Spencer ride, it's possible that we bumped into one there. So and we've talked with Mike last week about the ground maybe not quite being right for Roudemental. He probably wants a little bit, maybe not necessarily soft ground, but just something a little bit less attritional than the good to firm that we had. It's currently good at Chester. The forecast looks pretty dry, so hopefully it doesn't dry out too much and he'll get a run. But he's drawn 3, ridden by Stevie Donahoe, who's not someone I know a huge amount about, but hopefully we shall know more about Stevie come 5 o'clock tomorrow. But he should have a good chance. He's got a good draw, and that is half the battle, as we know, at Chester. So we'll look keenly forward to Roudemental in the 4:55 at Chester.
Yeah, and his pedigree-wise, just wanted to ask a question because I'm not involved in Roudemental. He is a footsteps in the sand, isn't he?
He is.
Who would normally be producing milers, I suppose, but I can see on the Dam Sire side there's a bit of stamina there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hugo certainly thought that, and Mike have certainly thought that a step up wouldn't be any problem for him. He sort of seems like that sort of relentless galloping type. So, and Chester is the sort of race course where, if you're stepping up for the first time, it's not a bad place to do it, particularly if you can get to the front. So we'll see how well he can get away. But obviously he's led the last twice, and if he can get to the front and stack them up a bit. And then slowly crank it up as he did 2 runs ago at Redcar, then hopefully he can hold them off down that short home straight. So we shall see. Again, it's fact finding mission, but I think we're hopeful that there's plenty more in the tank with Roudemental. So I think all the owners are going to be absolutely buzzing about a day out at Chester and having a runner and having a good chance with Roudemental. So that's where we are in the coming days with the Roudee Racing horses. So exciting times. It feels like we say that every week, but it's just brilliant for the syndicate and everybody involved to have that interest on such a regular basis. And talking of having an interest, you and I are going to have an interest elsewhere this weekend from a punting perspective.
Of course we are.
So it was nice to get back on the winners board. A Talking Horses podcast winner last week, tipped up by special guest Mike Edwards from Roudee Racing, and tipped up by myself independently. Let's just make that clear.
Make that clear.
Yeah. But I think he returned it. We both put him up each way, and he returned at 5-1. I thought there was always going to be some value in that race because Winter Power was always going to be short, and that's sort of the way it played out. Kings Lynn was backed a little bit. I think he was 13-2, 7-1 when we were recording the podcast. But that was a very taking run, and one of those where it went into the tracker after it was beaten by Flaming Rib, for me anyway, at Chester. And so, you see it pop up on the tracker and you're like, right, great, I've got one that I earmarked last time. I got a chance to put it up this time. And actually, Flaming Rib was very close to winning the Sandy Lane, the race before. So I watched this all back after the event, but I think if you were watching it live and you'd seen Flaming Rib very nearly win the Sandy Lane, then you would have probably thought the chances of Kings Lynn looked even better. And indeed, that form line now looks pretty strong.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
And Mr. Wilson was an absolutely
less said about that, the better,
pick.
To be honest. That's why I'm saying nothing.
2 weeks in a row, you've picked a blinder. He's shortened up. You've moved the market. Tom Siegel's followed you in the Racing Post, and then we've had no sort of a race. So I feel like you are due a change in fortune, my friend, because these selections make the world of sense. And so let's start with you.
No logic.
Well, exactly. There is logic. It's just got to be looked at over an appropriate sample size. And 2 weeks is not a big enough sample size.
Great.
But tell us who you like this weekend, Bruins.
It's an obvious one, but I can't believe the price. The horse is, and you'll know her well, absolutely flawless. Winner, of course, of the Lily Agnes. She reappears at Beverley tomorrow at 2:05 in a fillies condition stakes over the same trip of 5 furlongs. Now, if you watch back that Lily Agnes, absolutely flawless, did not get off to a good start at all. So missed the break essentially, and was hampered in doing so. But then you see how comfortably she ended up winning that race in what were, seemingly quite volatile conditions underfoot. It was obviously raining a lot that morning. The surface would have changed, in the hours before the race. She won with plenty in hand, I thought. So I was mega impressed by that. She is something around the 3-1 mark for this race tomorrow. It's a similar level of class. So it depends really on how the other horses that she's up against really improve from their first and second runs. But I just can't believe that price. I think there's loads more improvement to come. It's probably a horse that's destined for even bigger things than the race she's got tomorrow. So I'm all over that from a value perspective. It's got to be absolutely flawless for me in the 2:05 at Beverley.
Fantastic. I noticed that, sorry you mentioned this, I was just looking it up as you were talking. I noticed that Will Buick takes the ride as well. So that can only be a positive for a horse that, as you rightly say, I think Royal Ascot is on the horizon. So it would be a run well, probably win here and then go on to take aim at a Group 1. So very nice. And that would be a lovely form boost for Glorious Angel ahead of Monday. Absolutely flawless. Could show that Lily Agnes to be a pretty good race.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think it was. The feeling is that it was. So we just need a rubber stamp there from absolutely flawless to do so.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
And yourself, my good man, where are you firing your arrows?
So I was looking at this just jumped off that. I didn't have anything in the tracker that was jumping out at me. So I was like, damn it. I love it when there's that, like the Kings Lynn last week, when there's one, we're like, right, brilliant. I'm just going to put this up. Yeah. Don't have to do any research. I like this and I'm going to stick with it. Don't have anything like that this week. So I was having a look through the two main cards I looked at were Chester. I like punting at Chester just because you can sort of generally find something with the draw that, means it's going to have an obvious chance. There wasn't really anything. I noticed Fool's Rush In has got a decent chance. It's running tomorrow, but 11-4, something like that. So I settled on the 255 at Haydock, the Betfred Pinnacle Stakes Group 3 for fillies and mares. And the horse that I like is one that I am slightly worried that it's going to go off really short. But look, I think that this could be a William Haggis improver. And I mean, backing William Haggis horses at the moment, you could do a lot worse. He's currently operating at 38% strike rate. This is a See the Stars filly that is likely to be on the improve. Had some good performances last year, winning handicaps, and then finished off the season winning a listed race on the all-weather at Lingfield. But she just did so in the most taking fashion. I watched it back, and she was she had to come really wide of everything, probably 4 horses wide round the turn, but was making ground like the winner whilst coming 4 wide, and then absolutely bolted up by 4.5 lengths. And that was the sign of, I think, a horse that's probably going to have plenty more to come. See the Stars horses generally improve from 3 to 4, as I understand it. And I think William Haggis is the master handler with horses like that. It's 11 to 4 at the moment, but Tom Marquand on board. And again, Tom is banging in winners left, right and centre. So I want to be with that William Haggis, Tom Marquand pairing. So it's C La Rosa in the 255 Betfred Pinnacle Stakes at Haydock on Saturday for me.
Very nice. Very nice. I mean, the Tom Marquand thing, I was going to jump in and mention it if you weren't going to, because he's just riding out of his skin at the minute. Ever since we met him outside Chalk Coffee in Chester, his fortunes have just gone on, haven't they? So
absolutely, yeah. Like the sort of we're like the lamp of riding form, the genie lamp of riding form. A lovely man and a fantastic jockey. So
what's
there
not
you go.
to love?
We're going to try and get him on the podcast. We did ask him and he did say yes. So that's the challenge for us, is to try and find some time in the week where he's not riding winners, where he might come and have a chat with us. So that's we'll see what we can do on that front. Fantastic. All right. So that brings us to the end of another episode of the Talking Horses podcast. Thank you, everybody, as always, for listening. Remember, you can access the pod across all your favourite podcast platforms. Please rate and review. We would hugely appreciate it. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel for the video versions of the pod. Our guests keep bringing in little props that they show us, so I would recommend, Bruins, you put in a huge amount of work creating the videos, the final edited videos. Do watch them, because you get an extra level of intrigue. Make sure to follow the Talking Horses podcast, all one word, on Instagram for news about the horse, about the podcast, and plenty else from the horse racing world, including our weekend selections every Saturday morning. And please do leave your questions on any of those platforms if you have something that you would like us to tackle in future shows. Enjoy the racing this weekend, and of course, gamble responsibly, and we will see you all again next week.
See you next week.